My nephew asked to store one box in my basement. Then a detective asked about the missing bonds. My nephew Daniel asked if he could store one sealed box in my basement for just a few weeks. Months later, a detective stood on my front porch and asked whether I had seen a collection of bearer bonds belonging to an elderly client Daniel used to work for. I told him I had never heard of bearer bonds before that morning. Then he showed me a photograph of the missing certificates, and I recognized the blue metal box in the picture. It was sitting behind my furnace. The detective asked if anyone else had access to my basement. I said no, not unless I had let them in. That was when I remembered the small security camera my late husband William had installed after somebody broke into garages on our street. I had almost forgotten it was there. It faced the basement stairs, recording every person who came down and every box that went back up. The detective looked at me for a long moment and said, "Mrs. Clark, before you touch anything, we need to see that footage." That was the moment I understood Daniel had not asked me for storage. He had asked me for a hiding place. If you believe family should never use trust as a weapon, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and tell me in the comments, would you have opened the box the first day? Or trusted the person you loved? My name is Rebecca Clark. I was 68 years old then, a widow living in the same brick ranch house in Willow Creek, Ohio, where William and I had spent 34 years building a quiet life. Our house was not fancy. It had a narrow front porch, a maple tree that dropped red leaves all over the driveway every October, and a basement that William had organized with more care than most people give a kitchen. He labeled everything: Christmas lights in one clear bin, hand tools on a pegboard, old tax returns in a locking cabinet, my canning jars lined up like little soldiers on shelves he built himself. And in the back corner, beside the furnace room, was a plain wooden storage rack where I kept things I did not use often, but could not bear to throw away. Photo albums, William's old fishing tackle, a box of school papers from my daughter, Monica, a few quilts my mother had made before arthritis took the strength from her hands. After William died, people kept telling me I should sell the house. They did not mean to be cruel. Most of them thought they were being practical. "It's a lot for one woman," they would say. But it was not just a house to me. It was where William had brought me home after our wedding with rainwater dripping from the hem of my dress. It was where we raised Monica. It was where he taught Daniel how to use a socket wrench without stripping the bolt. Daniel was my sister Evelyn's son. Evelyn had died when Daniel was 19. A sudden stroke. No warning. No chance to prepare. She had been my younger sister, the one who still called me whenever she burned a pie crust or could not remember the name of a song from the 70s. After she passed, Daniel had no father nearby and no real sense of direction. William and I did what we could. We helped him finish community college. We bought him his first decent suit when he got an interview at a financial services office in Columbus. We gave him a place to stay twice when his rent situation fell apart. He was never an easy young man, but he had a sweet side when he let it show. He remembered birthdays. He hugged too hard. He called me Aunt Becky even after he was grown, even after he had become taller than William. For years, that nickname softened me before I could stop it. That was my blind spot. I did not see Daniel as a man capable of making calculated choices. I saw him as the grieving 19-year-old who had stood in my kitchen after his mother's funeral, staring at a plate of untouched food, and whispered, "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now." By the time this happened, Daniel was 34. He had worked at a small wealth management firm called Bannon and Price. His title changed every few years. But from what he told me, he handled client paperwork, organized account records, and sometimes drove elderly clients to meetings if their families could not. He had never been rich. In truth, Daniel was always one unexpected bill away from trouble. He rented a small apartment in Columbus. He had a pickup truck that made a coughing sound every winter. He had a habit of buying things he could not afford whenever he felt ashamed about something else. But he always had an explanation. A delayed paycheck, a landlord raising rent, a former girlfriend who had left him with bills, a manager who did not appreciate how hard he worked. I had learned not to lend him money casually. That lesson came after I loaned him $800 for a repair he promised would keep him employed. 2 months later, I saw photographs online of Daniel at a casino outside Cincinnati, holding a drink in one hand and a stack of poker chips in the other. He repaid me eventually, $20 at a time. But he did not repay the trust as easily. Still, when he came to my house in March carrying a dented cardboard box and wearing a look I recognized too well, I did not think about the casino. I thought about his mother. It was a cold Tuesday afternoon. Snow had melted into gray piles along the street, and I had just taken a pot roast from the oven. Daniel knocked, instead of using the spare key I had once given him, which should have told me something. He stood on the porch with his shoulders hunched inside a black jacket. "Aunt Becky," he said. "You got a minute?" "Of course," I said. "Come in before you freeze." He walked into the kitchen but did not sit down. He kept one hand on the box, as if he was afraid someone might take it from him. "What's in there?" I asked. "Just paperwork," he said quickly. "Nothing important. Old work files and some personal stuff." I looked at him. "Daniel, you know you should not be bringing client files to my house." "It's not client stuff," he said. "I mean, some of it is notes. But it's old. I got laid off last week." That surprised me enough that I forgot the box for a moment. "Laid off?" He rubbed his hand over the back of his neck. "They said the office was restructuring. They let 3 people go, me included." I poured him coffee. He barely touched it. He told me the firm had changed management. He said he had been blamed for mistakes that were not his. He said they wanted younger people who would work late without complaining. There was enough truth in his voice to make me feel sorry for him, even if I did not know how much of the story was complete. Then he glanced toward the basement door. "My apartment is a mess right now," he said. "My landlord's selling the building, and I'm trying to move some things around. Could I keep this box in your basement for a few weeks? Just until I get settled?" I should have asked more questions. I should have said no until I knew exactly what was inside. But the box did not look dangerous. It was ordinary brown cardboard, taped shut along the top. Daniel looked tired, and I knew what it meant to be embarrassed by not having a stable place to put your things. So I opened the basement door and said, "1 box. Back shelf. And you come get it when you're settled." His face changed immediately. Not much. Just a release in his jaw. A breath he had been holding. "Thank you," he said. "You don't know how much this helps." At the time, I thought he meant the storage space. Later, I understood he meant something else entirely. The basement smelled like laundry detergent and old wood. Daniel carried the box down himself. I stayed near the stairs because my knee had been aching that week. He set it on the back shelf, behind 2 bins of winter blankets. Then he came upstairs too quickly. "Can I borrow the restroom?" he asked. Of course. While he was upstairs, I stood in the kitchen, watching the steam rise from the coffee he had not drank. I remember feeling unsettled, though I could not have said why. When he left, he hugged me and promised to call the next week. He did not. A week became 3. 3 weeks became 2 months. In April, I called and asked whether he had found another job. He said he was interviewing. In May, he said he was doing contract work. In June, he told me he had a situation with his landlord and might need to move again. Every time I mentioned the box, He brushed it aside. I'll get it soon. It's safe with you. Please don't worry about it. That last sentence stayed with me. Please don't worry about it. It was an odd thing to say about a box of old papers. Around that same time, I noticed little things changing in Daniel. He bought new boots. Not expensive enough to be flashy, but better than anything I had seen him wear in years. He started showing up with takeout from restaurants he once said were overpriced. He replaced the cracked screen on his phone. None of that proved anything. People can find work. People can receive help. People can make better decisions. But Daniel had always told me when he caught a break. This time, he told me nothing. Then, one Sunday afternoon in July, he arrived without calling first. I had just come home from church. I was still wearing my blue dress and had a container of lemon bars in my hands. Daniel was parked in my driveway. He looked irritated when I pulled in, as though he had been waiting too long. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to make it light. "I need to grab that box." "Now?" "Yeah. I've got a friend with a truck." I looked past him. There was no truck, just Daniel's old pickup at the curb. "You said it was one box?" I said. "It is." "Then why are you in such a hurry?" He sighed. "Aunt Becky. Please. I have a lot going on." That was the first time his tone made me feel less like family and more like an obstacle. I should have stopped him there. I know that now. But grief changes the way you measure people. After losing William, I had spent years telling myself not to make every sharp word into a battle, not to become suspicious, not to turn into someone who looked for betrayal behind every closed door. So I stepped aside. Daniel went down to the basement alone. He was down there longer than it should have taken to lift one box. I could hear footsteps, a scraping noise. Then the furnace room door opened and closed. When he came back upstairs, he was carrying a blue metal lockbox, not the cardboard box he had brought in. I stared at it. "That isn't the box you stored?" I said. He looked down, then smiled too quickly. "Oh, that cardboard one fell apart. I moved the important things into this." The blue box was about the size of a briefcase. It had a small brass latch on the front and scratches around the handle. "Where did that come from?" I asked. "Thrift store," he said. "I found it cheap." "Why didn't you tell me you were bringing a metal box into my basement?" He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Because I didn't think I needed to file a report with you." The words landed harder than he seemed to expect. He looked at my face and immediately softened his voice. "I'm sorry. I'm stressed. That's all. I just need to get moving." He picked up the blue box and headed toward the front door. But something stopped him. His phone rang. He looked at the screen, and all the colors seemed to leave his face. He did not answer. It rang again. Then he put the blue box down by the door, walked into my laundry room, and spoke in a low voice I could not make out. When he came back, he was pale and sweating despite the summer heat. "I have to go," he said. "What about your box?" "I'll come back." "Danielle, are you all right?" He did not answer me. He walked out without the blue box. I stood in my front hallway for several minutes, listening to his truck pull away. Then I locked the door. For the first time, I looked at that box, not as something belonging to my nephew, but as something he was afraid to take with him. I did not open it. Not then. Instead, I carried it back down to the basement and placed it on the workbench near William's old tool chest. I told myself I was respecting Daniel's privacy, but I also did something I had not done in months. I checked the little security camera. The camera still worked. Its red light blinked softly above the basement stairs. And, when I opened the recording app on my tablet, I saw that it had been saving footage all along. I did not watch it that night. I wish I could tell you it was because I had faith in Daniel. The truth is, I was afraid of what I might see. 3 days later, Detective Nolan Pierce stood on my porch holding a photograph of a blue metal lockbox, and he told me that an 81-year-old widow named Margaret Ellison had reported more than $200,000 in bearer bonds missing from a private records cabinet. The last employee confirmed to have handled that cabinet before the bonds disappeared was my nephew, Daniel. Detective Pierce did not touch the blue lockbox when he came into my house. He stood beside my dining room table with his notebook open while I sat across from him, trying to understand how a single box in my basement had turned into a conversation about stolen bonds and police evidence. He was not dramatic. That was what frightened me most. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse Daniel in front of me. He simply asked careful questions and waited for the truth to fit together. "Mrs. Clark," he said, "I need to be clear. You are not in trouble. We have no reason to believe you knew what may be in that box." "Maybe?" I asked. "The missing bonds are physical certificates. Whoever has them could transfer them to another person, sell them through the wrong channels, or use them as leverage. We need to preserve the box exactly as it is." I looked toward the basement door. "And Daniel?" Detective Pierce closed his notebook for a moment. "Your nephew was one of several employees with access to records connected to Mrs. Ellison. He left Bannon and Price shortly before the theft was discovered. He told me he was laid off. We are still reviewing that." The phrase sounded polite, but I understood what it meant. Daniel had lied. Not necessarily about everything. Not yet. But enough. The detective asked whether I had keys hidden outside, whether Daniel had ever stayed at the house, and whether he still had access to the spare key William and I once kept for family emergencies. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "He did," I said. "I don't know if he still does." "Where was it?" "Under a flower pot by the garage. William put it there years ago." Detective Pierce nodded slowly. "Could you show me?" I led him through the kitchen, past the laundry room, and out the side door. The flower pot was still there. A faded green ceramic pot with a struggling fern inside. I lifted it. The key was gone. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then Detective Pierce said, "When did you last check it?" "I don't know," I whispered. "Months ago." He wrote something down. I felt ashamed then. Though I had done nothing wrong. That is one of the quietest injuries betrayal causes. It makes you question the kindness you offered. It turns ordinary trust into something that feels foolish. But Detective Pierce did not make me feel foolish. He said, "You gave your nephew access because he was family. That does not make you responsible for what he chose to do with it." I wanted to believe him. Still, when we went back inside, I could not stop thinking about every time Daniel had come through that side door. Every holiday. Every Sunday dinner. Every occasion when I had said, "You know where the key is." The detective contacted a judge for a warrant to secure the lockbox. While we waited, he asked if I would voluntarily show him the basement camera footage. "Yes," I said. My hands trembled as I carried my tablet to the dining room table. The camera system was simple. William had bought it after a string of garage break-ins on our street. He had always been practical about security, but never paranoid. People don't have to be evil to take what isn't theirs, he used to say. Sometimes they just see an easy chance. At the time, I thought he was talking about strangers. I opened the camera app. There were months of recorded clips, each one marked with a date and time. The camera faced the basement stairs and part of the storage area. It could not see inside the furnace room, but it showed enough. Detective Pierce asked me to start with the day Daniel first brought the cardboard box. I pressed play. There I was on March 12, standing at the top of the basement stairs in my house slippers. Daniel came down, carrying the brown box against his chest. He set it on the back shelf, exactly where I remembered. Then he looked up at the camera. Not casually. Directly. He stood still for almost 4 seconds, staring into the lens. I felt the back of my neck tighten. He knew it was there. I said. Detective Pierce leaned closer to the screen. It appears so. On the video, Daniel lifted the cardboard box, moved it behind the winter blankets, then walked into the furnace room. He was out of view for less than a minute. When he came back, his jacket looked heavier on one side. At the time, I had been upstairs making coffee. I had never noticed. The detective asked me to scroll through the next several weeks. At first, there was nothing unusual. Me carrying laundry. My neighbor, Mrs. Givens, coming down once to help me move a box of old books. A plumber checking a pipe near the utility sink. Then we found April 3. I had been at my weekly physical therapy appointment for my knee. The clip began at 10:17 inches the morning. The side door opened. Daniel came into the basement alone. He did not knock. He did not call. He used the spare key. He wore a gray hoodie, a ball cap, and gloves. For a moment, I could not breathe. He knew I was gone. I said. Detective Pierce did not look away from the screen. Did you tell him about your appointments? Yes, I said. He asked how my knee was doing. I told him I went every Wednesday. Daniel walked straight to the back shelf. He removed the cardboard box. Then he carried a blue metal lockbox down the stairs. The same blue lockbox now sitting behind my furnace. On the video, Daniel placed the blue box exactly where the cardboard box had been. But then he did something I did not understand. He opened the cardboard box. The camera angle was not perfect, but I could see him remove a stack of what looked like old newspapers and packing paper. He put those loose papers into a black trash bag. Then he carried the empty cardboard box back upstairs. He left with it. What was in the cardboard box? Detective Pierce asked. I don't know, I said. Daniel sealed it before he came. The detective paused the footage. Could have been a decoy. Could have held documents temporarily. We'll find out. We kept watching. The next clip that mattered was July 14, the day Daniel had come after church. Seeing it on camera was worse than remembering it. I watched him come down the stairs, moving fast. I watched him open the furnace room door. I watched him lift the blue lockbox and carry it upstairs. Then, almost 10 minutes later, I watched him come back down. He was no longer holding the blue lockbox. He was holding a black duffel bag. He looked straight at the camera again. This time, he reached up. The screen went dark. He turned it off? I said. Yes, Detective Pierce replied, but only after he came back down. My stomach dropped. He left the lockbox by my front door. I saw it. Then he may have removed something before he left, the detective said. Or he may have realized the box itself was too risky to transport. The screen remained black for 12 minutes. Then the picture returned. Daniel came up the stairs empty-handed. And a few seconds later, I appeared at the bottom of the stairs, carrying the blue box back toward the workbench. I had done exactly what he wanted. I had placed the box where he could come back for it later. I covered my mouth with one hand. He used me, I said. Detective Pierce's voice was gentle but firm. He used your home? That is not the same as you helping him. But it felt like the same thing. It felt as if every warm meal I had served Daniel, every holiday card, every time I had made room for him at my table, had been turned into a map of my vulnerabilities. By late afternoon, 2 more officers arrived with the warrant. They photographed the basement, the workbench, the storage shelf, and the lockbox. One officer placed evidence tape around the blue metal case before carrying it out in a sealed bag. I watched it leave my house and felt strangely empty. The lockbox had been in my basement for months. It had sat only a few feet from where I folded laundry and stored Christmas decorations. I had passed it without knowing that somebody else's security, somebody else's inheritance, somebody else's peace of mind might be trapped inside. Before Detective Pierce left, he gave me his card. "If Daniel contacts you," he said, "do not argue with him about the investigation. Do not tell him what we found. Just call me. What if he comes here? Call 911. Don't let him inside." I nodded, but my mind could not accept the sentence. Do not let him inside. This was Daniel, the boy who used to sleep on our sofa with a blanket pulled up to his chin. The young man William had driven to work when his truck broke down. The nephew who had cried into my shoulder at Evelyn's funeral. But the detective was asking me to treat him as someone I needed protection from. That evening, I changed every lock on the house. Not because I wanted to, because I had finally understood that love without boundaries is not kindness. Sometimes, it is simply an unlocked door. The locksmith, a quiet man named Mr. Alvarez, worked until after dark. He installed new deadbolts on the front and side doors and replaced the lock leading from the garage into the house. "Anybody else have a key?" he asked. "My daughter used to," I said. "And my nephew? Want me to rekey the garage too?" "Yes," I said. When he handed me the new keys, they felt heavier than keys should. I placed one in my purse, one in the kitchen drawer, and one in a small envelope for Monica. I did not give one to Daniel. At 8:43 that night, my phone rang. His name appeared on the screen. Daniel calling. I stared at it until it stopped. Then he called again. This time, I answered. "Aunt Becky," he said, too casually. "Hey, I've been trying to reach you. You left a box at my house." There was a pause. "What box?" "The blue lockbox." Another pause. Longer this time. "Oh, right. Yeah, I meant to come back for that. You came back into my basement in April." His breathing changed. "What are you talking about?" "I have a camera, Daniel." The line went silent. Then he said, "You have a camera in the basement? You knew that?" "No, I didn't." "Don't lie to me again." His voice sharpened. "Okay, fine. I went down there." "So what?" "I had a box stored there. You said I could keep it there. You used the spare key while I was at therapy. I'm family. That does not give you permission to enter my home whenever you want." For a second, I heard only traffic in the background. Then Daniel lowered his voice. "Listen, whatever you think you saw, you're misunderstanding it. Detective Pierce came to my house today." That was the wrong thing to say. I knew it the moment I said it. Daniel did not answer. "Daniel?" I said. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "What did you tell him?" "The truth." "What did he take?" I tightened my grip on the phone. "You already know." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do." He exhaled sharply, almost like a laugh. But there was panic underneath it. "Aunt Becky, you need to stay out of this." "I am in it. You put me in it." "No, you don't understand what's going on." "Then explain it." He said nothing. I waited. Finally, he whispered, "Those bonds weren't supposed to be there." The words seemed to pull the air from the room. "Where were they supposed to be?" I asked. Daniel did not answer. Instead, he said, "Did the detective mention a man named Curtis Vale?" "No." "Good," Daniel said quickly. "Good. Because if he does, don't talk to him. Don't answer the door if he comes around. You hear me?" Who is Curtis Vale? But Daniel had already hung up. I stood in my dark kitchen holding the phone against my ear, listening to nothing. A few minutes later, Detective Pierce called. He had received preliminary information from the evidence team. The blue lockbox contained no bearer bonds. It contained something else. A thick folder of copied client records from Bannon and Price. Several blank transfer forms. A list of names, account numbers, and home addresses. And one handwritten page with Daniel's name at the top. Under it were 3 words that made my hands begin to shake. Rebecca's house. Basement access. I did not sleep that night. Every sound in the house felt different after Daniel's call. The refrigerator humming. A branch tapping against the kitchen window. The furnace turning on downstairs. Close to the place where he had hidden something that could have cost another woman her entire sense of security. I sat at my dining room table until nearly 2 a.m. with Detective Pierce's card beside my phone. Rebecca's house. Basement access. The words kept repeating in my mind. Not Aunt Becky's house. Not a place he loved. Not the home where he had spent Christmas mornings and Sunday dinners. Access. That was how Daniel had written about me. Like I was a door code. Like my home was an empty location on a plan. At 7:15 the next morning, I called Detective Pierce and told him everything Daniel had said about Curtis Vale. He did not sound surprised. "Thank you for calling," he said. "We were hoping you would—" "Who is he?" I asked. "Mr. Vale is someone we've encountered before. He is not an employee of Bannon and Price, but he has connections to people who seek out improperly transferred financial instruments." "Are you saying Daniel worked with him?" "I'm saying we are investigating that possibility." I looked out at my driveway. The maple tree was still. The street was quiet. Daniel said I should not answer the door if this man comes here. "I want you to take that seriously," Detective Pierce said. "Do not meet with Daniel alone either. If he contacts you, let us know." The detective explained that investigators had asked Bannon and Price to preserve all relevant employment records, building access logs, email accounts, and client file activity. They had also contacted Mrs. Ellison's attorney and her family. I asked how Mrs. Ellison was handling it. There was a pause before he answered. "She is frightened," he said. The bonds were part of her late husband's estate. She kept them because he had purchased them over decades, and she was in the process of moving them into a properly managed account. That sentence broke something open in me. I thought about Margaret Ellison sitting in her own house, perhaps looking at an empty cabinet, the way I had looked at my missing spare key. People often talk about theft, as if it is only about money. But it is also about memory. It is about the life someone built, the promises they believed were safe, and the awful question that comes afterward. Who knew enough to take it from me? I told Detective Pierce I would cooperate with anything he needed. That afternoon, Monica came over. I had not called her at first, because I wanted to protect her from it. That was an old habit of mine. When William got sick, I had tried to carry every frightening detail alone, so Monica would not worry. When bills came in, I told her we were fine before I even knew whether we were. But hiding trouble does not make it smaller. It only makes it lonelier. So I called her. Monica arrived with a bag of groceries. Her hair pulled back, her eyes already wet before I had said a word. "What happened?" she asked. I told her everything. The box, the camera, the detective, the missing bonds, Daniel's call, the words written on that page. She sat very still while I spoke. When I finished, she looked toward the basement door. "He planned to use your house," she said. "Yes." "Did he plan to steal from you too?" "I don't know." "That is not an answer you should have to live with?" I wanted to say he was desperate, I wanted to say there must be an explanation that would let me keep the Daniel I remembered. But Monica had known him all her life too. She had played cards with him at our kitchen table. She had defended him. When relatives called him unreliable, she had been the one who helped him pack his mother's apartment after Evelyn died. Her sadness was not smaller than mine. It was simply clearer. "Mom," she said softly, "you have to stop protecting him from the consequences of things he chose." I looked down at my hands. I don't want him hurt. Neither do I. But that is different from letting him hurt you. For the first time since Detective Pierce had come to my door, I cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. I cried the way people cry. When they finally understand that a person they loved has been standing on the other side of a line for longer than they knew. Monica stayed with me that night. The following afternoon, Detective Pierce called with an update. The investigation had uncovered an email Daniel had sent from his work account shortly before he left Bannon and Price. It contained a scanned list of client holdings, including assets that were supposed to remain in secure records, storage. The email had been sent to an account investigators believed was connected to Curtis Vale. There was more. Building access records showed Daniel had entered the firm on a Saturday morning, 3 days after he told me he had been laid off. He had used an employee badge that should have been deactivated, and the client record cabinet, containing Mrs. Zodi, Ellison's bonds had been accessed less than 20 minutes later. What does that mean? I asked. It means the evidence is becoming more specific, Detective Pierce said, and it gives us grounds to seek additional warrants. Did Daniel take the bonds? We believe he removed them from the office, but we still need to locate them and determine whether anyone else possessed or transferred them. I thought of the blue lockbox. Then why would he keep the records in my basement instead of the bonds? Because records can be used as leverage, the detective said. They can identify people, accounts, and assets. And sometimes a person keeps copies because they don't trust their partner in a crime. That made a sick kind of sense. Daniel had not hidden the folder because he was innocent. He had hidden it because he was afraid. Fear had been in his eyes that day. He left the blue box on my porch. I had seen it and mistaken it for stress. But guilt can look a lot like exhaustion when you love someone enough to give them the benefit of every doubt. 2 days later, Daniel came back. It was just after 6 in the evening. Monica had gone home, and I was watering the basil plants on my back patio when I heard a truck stop in front of the house. I did not go to the front door. I looked through the side window. Daniel was standing on the porch. He had lost weight since I had seen him. His beard was uneven. His shirt was wrinkled, and there were dark shadows under his eyes. For a moment, I saw my sister in him. Then he knocked. "Aunt Becky," he called. "Please, I need to talk to you." I stepped away from the window and called Detective Pierce. He had told me to call, so I called. Then I stood behind the locked door and said, "You cannot come in." "I'm not asking to come in. I just need you to listen. Say what you need to say from there." He lowered his voice. "I messed up." The sentence hung between us. "How?" I asked. "I got in over my head. That's all." "With what?" "Money. You stole from an 81-year-old woman." "I didn't mean for it to go that far." "That is not an answer." He ran both hands through his hair. "I took some things from the office. Curtis said he knew people who could help me turn them into cash. He said it was temporary. He said the firm had insurance, and nobody would get hurt." "And you believed him?" "I needed money." "For what? Daniel?" He looked away. I waited. Finally, he said, "I owed people." "Who?" "I can't tell you." "You can. You just don't want to." His face tightened. "You don't understand what they can do?" "No," I said, but I understand what you did." Daniel took one step closer to the door. "I didn't want to involve you. You used my house. I needed somewhere Curtis wouldn't know about. You wrote down my basement access. I was scared. You should have been—" His eyes filled, and for 1 second I almost opened the door. Then he said, "The bonds are gone anyway." I stood completely still. "What did you say?" "I don't have them." "Where are they?" "I gave them to Curtis." "When?" "Before I came to your house that Sunday." That detail mattered. It meant the blue lockbox had never been the final hiding place for the bonds. Daniel had used it as a decoy, a place to stash client records and paperwork while he tried to stay ahead of the people he had involved. But it also meant he knew exactly what had happened to the bonds. "You need to tell the detective that," I said. "No." "Then I will." "You already did enough." I felt my grief harden into something steadier. "No, Daniel. I did what you should have done before you brought that box to my house." He hit the side of his fist against the porch railing. I said I was sorry. "No," I said. "You said you were scared?" He stared through the narrow glass panel beside the door. I could see his reflection, but not his eyes clearly. "You always thought I was a screw-up," he said. "That is not true. You always looked at me like I needed saving. I looked at you like family." "That's worse." His words hurt. They hurt because there was enough shame inside him to turn every kindness into an accusation. But I had learned something by then. I could be sorry for Daniel's pain without accepting blame for his choices. "I loved you," I said quietly. "I still do. But I will not let you make me part of this." A police cruiser turned onto our street. Daniel heard it before he saw it. For a second, he looked like he might run. Then Detective Pierce's car stopped behind his truck, and another officer approached from the sidewalk. Daniel did not run. He put his hands on the porch railing and bowed his head. Detective Pierce spoke to him calmly. I could not hear every word, but I heard Daniel say, "I want a lawyer." The detective nodded. No one shouted. No one dragged him away. Daniel was not convicted that night. Real consequences do not happen neatly in a single hour. He was taken in for questioning. His attorney came. Investigators continued reviewing documents, phone records, and the camera footage from my basement. A week later, Detective Pierce told me they had located Curtis Vale at a storage facility outside Columbus. The search warrant for the unit uncovered the missing bearer bonds, still bundled in their original envelopes, along with forged transfer paperwork and records tied to other attempted thefts. Mrs. Ellison's bonds were recovered before they could be sold. When I heard that, I sat down at my kitchen table and cried again. But those tears were different. They were not for Daniel. They were for Margaret Ellison, who would not have to spend the rest of her life wondering whether her husband's savings had disappeared forever. Over the next several months, the case moved slowly through the courts. Daniel eventually agreed to cooperate with investigators. He gave a full statement about Curtis Vale, the stolen records, and the debts that had pushed him into choices he had once sworn he would never make. He faced charges for his role. Curtis faced his own. I did not attend every hearing. I attended the one where Daniel looked across the courtroom and saw me sitting beside Monica. He looked older than 34. Not because of his clothes or his hair, because the easy excuses were gone. Afterward, his attorney asked whether I would speak with him. I agreed to 10 minutes in a small visitor room. Daniel sat across from me with his hands folded. "I'm sorry," he said. This time, he did not add an excuse. He did not mention money. He did not mention Curtis. He did not say he had been scared. He just said, "I'm sorry I used you." I looked at him for a long time. "I believe you are sorry," I said, But being sorry does not give you back access to my life the way it was. He nodded slowly. I know. You will not have a key to my home. You will not store anything here. You will not ask me to hide anything for you. And if you want a relationship with me someday, it will have to be built on truth over time. His eyes filled with tears. I understand. I did not tell him everything was forgiven. It was too soon for that. And forgiveness is not something another person gets to demand, because they finally understand the damage they caused. But I told him I hoped he would choose honesty from then on. Even when it cost him, that was all I could offer. And it was enough. The first Saturday after the case reached a turning point, I went down to my basement alone. The shelves looked the same. William's tool chest was still there. The Christmas lights were still in their clear plastic bin. The furnace made its old familiar sound. But the corner where Daniel had hidden the box was empty. I stood there for a while, then took down the small camera above the stairs. I replaced it with a newer one that sent alerts to my phone. Not because I wanted to live in fear. Because peace is not the same as pretending nothing can happen. Peace is knowing you have seen the truth, protected what matters, and chosen not to abandon yourself again. Later that afternoon, Monica came over with tomato plants for my garden. We worked in the backyard until the sun lowered behind the maple tree. Dirt got under our fingernails. We laughed when one of the pots tipped over. For the first time in months, my house felt like a home again, instead of a place where something had been hidden. I still think about Daniel. I still miss the version of him I believed in. But I do not confuse missing someone with making room for their lies. That was the lesson I carried forward. Family can ask for help. Family can make mistakes. Family can even deserve compassion. But nobody, not a nephew, not a child, not anyone you love has the right to turn your trust into their hiding place. If Rebecca's story reminded you that dignity needs boundaries, please subscribe for more stories of truth, family accountability, and hard-won justice. Like this video, and leave a comment. Should Rebecca ever give Daniel another chance after he proves he has changed, or was her boundary exactly where it needed to be?